This vlog was written in 2008 by Simple Man, also known as Bacon, and Miles Cole. Did the religious right molest the Republican Party, or did the Republican Party molest the church? Or maybe they willfully laid down together and committed blasphemy. Either way, the lines have been drawn, and I fear there is no going back. Someone has taken a hit, but who was hurt the worst? I believe that answer is very easy. Everyone in this world has been hurt by this most unholy of acts. The religious right and the Republican Party has been flirting with one another for years, but they didn't really go all the way until George W. Bush came in the spotlight proclaiming that he was a sinner and had been born again. It didn't matter to them that he had no spiritual counsel other than television evangelist. They only wanted one of them, or someone who was sympathetic to them in the White House. It didn't matter to them that his opponent Al Gore was a Baptist. Evangelical religion doesn't conform well with other established mainstream religions. They have become the louder voice because they use media as their pulpit. Anyone who they deem as their enemy, or anyone who they believe to be in their way, will and has felt their smite. The two-headed serpent of the religious right had been waging a war with a friendly smile for years before Bush came along. Any day of the week you could turn on the television and see the jolly round face of Jerry Falwell or the hypnotizing smile of Pat Robertson as they demonized their political enemies. Most of us dismissed them and allowed the religious right to grow. Some mainstream churches even allowed guest pastors with religious right evangelical views to come into their congregation and poison it with hate. The meek will inherit the earth turned into the meek is too weak to control the world. They preached about waging war in the name of God and forcing complaisance with their political ideology while masking it as a Christian one. Barry Goldwater, arguably the godfather of conservatism, said, "I am a conservative Republican, but I believe in democracy and the separation of church and state." The conservative movement is founded on the simple tenet that people have the right to live life as they please as long as they don't hurt anyone else in the process. The religious factions will go on imposing their will on others. I don't have any respect for the religious right. Every good Christian should line up and kick Jerry Falwell's ass. Most reading this would be surprised to learn that the organized religions used to favor Democrat Party, and some still do. They're just not as loud as their stepbrethren, the religious right. In the 1960s many things changed. The Civil Rights Bill was signed by the Democrat President Pounds Johnson, who with a stroke of pen declared "There goes the South," and so went the Southern religious support. What once was a Democrat stronghold became a Republican stronghold with that one action, and I highly doubt that many could argue the two weren't somewhat related. The South has always been the strongest of believers in the written word of the Bible, and for anyone to say that the two aren't related is like denying that grits can't be found in a Southern restaurant. Prior to that action, the Democrat Party was the voice of the farmers, working class, and welfare for the poor, which was considered very Christian and fit well with the Southern states. Some reading this may want to point towards Roe v. Wade as the reason why the Southern Christians Democrats in the South turned Republican overnight, but that didn't happen until 1973, and Nixon, a Californian Republican politician and Quaker, won his second term in office, and it was very clear by congressional races in the South from 1968, 70 and 72 that Johnson's prediction had come true. In 1968 Nixon won every single Southern state, an entire region that was once Democrat. The two parties had switched hands in the South. Ronald Reagan was the first Republican to reach out to the religious right when he said, "You can't endorse me, but I'll endorse you." Reagan was a very unlikely of choices for the religious right. He was a Hollywood movie star that was divorced and had very little religious background. By Reagan reaching out to the evangelicals, he cemented their support. Because the evangelicals are more concerned with their power than the principles of the Christian faith. Which is why the Southern Christian Jimmy Carter, who brought the term "born again" into the national light, lost the vote of the Southern Christians. And to this day the evangelicals demonizes Carter, a man who after leaving office worked for Habitat for Humanity and taught Sunday school. Reagan was the new face of the political religious right, even though he never attended church. All of a sudden it was very acceptable to stay home, watch a preacher on TV, and send in your tithes from there. It was now more than okay to be hateful and claim to be Christian. It was now okay to hate the poor and claim to be godlike. It was now all right to strike down those who oppose you in the name of the Lord. Reagan may not have known it, he may have just been playing politics, but he had replaced Jesus in the eyes of the religious right. What would Jesus do? Slogans turned to what would Reagan do? Blasphemy had indeed occurred, but it wasn't Reagan's fault. It was the two-headed serpent of the evangelical religious right, Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, a hateful message, vengeful congregation and a naive public. The honeymoon between America and evangelicals who had helped to usher in Jimmy Carter by showing us a kind and understanding face had now brought in the actor who was playing Moses himself. No longer would we see the meek and mildness of Christians but the thundering hand of God with dyed hair and makeup on. George W. Bush was without a doubt a man to whom they could manipulate. The evangelicals had gone through 8 years of Clinton's middle-of-the-road politics and were cursing God for bringing them such a charismatic, good-looking womanizer. No good that Clinton had done could allow them to forgive him. The evangelicals who pride themselves on forgiveness couldn't find it in their hearts to forgive Clinton. They couldn't wait to get one of their own in the White House. At last someone who had been forgiven by God through the TV set was going to lead them. A false prophet. Or someone they could manipulate. Only time would tell. And it did. On September the 11th, 2001, the opportunity presented itself and the evangelicals fell over themselves screaming that they had told us so. The end of the world was here and they had a leader, our leader, and he believed them. If something from the book of Revelations didn't fit, they made it fit. They declared war, then they spread rumors of war via axis of evil. They said global warming was God-made. They were trying to force the hand of God and took the war as close to Israel as they could get. They even proclaimed Iraq as the battleground where Armageddon would take place. It was as if they were building the battlefield and clearing a spot at the table for the Last Supper. Church attendance skyrocketed and it held because the fear meter told them to stay. It was nearly Jonestown on a national scale. Some of us mainstream Christians stayed back and watched as our churches were soaked with fear and lit with hate. Anyone who didn't lockstep with the president and the doomsday evangelical right-wingers were quickly persecuted and suspect. God was about to smite the evildoers, and that meant anyone who didn't agree with the religious right. There for a little while I thought maybe they're right. Maybe the end was coming, but it would be evangelical right-wingers who will be branding us with the mark of the beast. Now that the marriage between the Republican Party and the evangelical religious right is on shaky ground, I still hear the leftover remnants of hate and fear. The poor is being blamed for the greed of those who ran our economy into the ground. Jimmy Carter, a real Christian, is being crucified by the guilt of his accusers. Minorities are being used as both scapegoats and fake figureheads. The divide between the haves and have-nots has never been wider. The road from common sense to hysteria never so short. They have done this and more in the name of God, and I fear for their souls because I believe it is blasphemy to declare war, hate and fear in the name of God. To the readers, voters, pundits, talking heads and politicians I say, go ahead and practice politics, but leave God out of it. God is neither a Democrat or Republican. Jesus is neither conservative or liberal. God doesn't have to spin the truth. He is the truth. So please, in the name of God, leave him out of it.